Hello, welcome to Calling America, where patriots from across the U.S. come together to discuss current bills being passed by Congress and executive orders being signed by former Vice President Joe Biden, and furthermore, how those bills and executive orders affect each of us in our respective states. As always, unless we are quoting direct sources, all statements in this video are personal opinions. You can find all sources in the description below.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Calling America, an Official Truth Matters podcast / I'm a broadcast. I am Ethan Hay. I am currently a college student at Utah Valley University. I am studying communications with an emphasis in media and journalism studies, and I am a United States Navy veteran. Courtenay?
I am Courtenay Turner. I am also a co-founder of Truth Matters, and I am the host of the Courtenay Turner podcast. I live in Santa Monica, California. Mitch?
My name is Mitchell Peel. I'm from the great state of Georgia. I'm a DOE contract employee for about 23 years now, and that's me.
I'm Shawn Wood. I've been living in Vegas for about 17 years now. I work in sales and I'm starting a YouTube channel. Just haven't gone it quite up yet.
Welcome, everyone. Glad that you're here. And today we got a heavy topic that has been in the news a lot lately due to the fact that there is literally bombs falling on Israel. And that is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Israel and the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States primarily, but also around the Western world as well. You guys know the format that we're going into, but for those who are just joining in for the first time, what Calling America is it's a format where we take people from all across the country and we talk about a specific issue or a specific set of legislation. And from there, we make a concerted effort to debate, discuss those particular issues. Israel, let's begin.
So I know typically we go through like how it's affecting each state. There has been a huge rise in anti-Semitism across the country. And there has certainly been several attacks here in California. There have been a lot of groups that have spoken up against some of the rise in attacks and defamation that we've seen. There's been a lot of graffiti outside of certain synagogues. There's been attacks on children and attacks on high school students. It's very disheartening to see. And there's been, I feel like, a lot of confusion as well, because it's kind of curious why this is, rising so much now. Some of it is certainly due to the recent circumstances in the Middle East and some of the controversy that's occurring there. But a lot of, from what I was seeing in the research that I was doing, a lot of the increase in anti-Semitism has actually been happening over the past 3 years. So at least in California. So that's interesting. I'm not sure what is contributing to that. There have been some theories that have been put forth, and they're actually theories that I was really concerned about. I know Ethan knows, you two might know as well. I was very concerned about some of the conspiracy theories that have been put forth that I think have created some misinformation, disinformation, and given rise to some of the anti-Semitism. And it is very concerning.
I don't have a lot of knowledge in the history. I've, stuff that I've read and you see on the news and stuff like that. The way I kind of approach this is really kind of a common sense kind of perspective when it comes to, to the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And that's pretty much, I don't think that Israel is really at war or the people are at war with Palestinians. This is a conflict between Israel and Hamas. And ever since the Palestinians, and I kind of put that in quotes, elected Hamas into power, they thought it was an election. It was actually a coronation. So with that said, that's all they're fighting is Hamas. And Hamas, if you look at their mantra when it comes to Jewish people, they want them dead. They want them wiped off the map, not just in Israel. They want them gone in America. They want them gone in Russia, wherever they are. And when you look at that and you say, how in the world do you make peace with the people like that?
Right.
You know, it just doesn't make it doesn't make a common sense to me. If everybody's calling for a two-state solution, how do you have a two-state solution if one of the states doesn't believe you have a right to exist in the first place? So
Right.
it's from a common sense standpoint. And you know, I'll kind of throw it out there, and I've said it to friends before. I said, look, let them find it out. And if this is all about who was there first, you know, one could say, you know, Judaism been around for 3,000 years, way before Christianity and Islam has. One would say they have a right to be there, but if somebody's saying, "Hey, I think that's wrong. We need to be there," we'll find it out. Let's see who wins. I know that's kind of a controversial way to look at it, but I'm almost tired of seeing rockets flying there indiscriminately and people yell at the Israelis for protecting themselves. That's just so stupid. Why would you yell and, you know, at least try and get there and say, get Hamas out and let the real Palestinian people negotiate a peace deal with Israel and then let things lay where they lay. It just really doesn't make sense. You know, I've heard, you know, the same analogy is like if Canada started shelling New York, would the world yell at us for firing rockets back? I mean, I wouldn't think so. And when I see that on the news and people criticizing Israel for firing rockets back to where the rockets came from, which are hidden in neighborhoods and stuff like that, you know, it's sad to see people, you know, innocent people lose their lives, but who's to blame for that? I think it's Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Before you, I want to say I use that analogy a lot too. With the like, you asked how long has the Islamic calendar been, and how long has the Hebrew calendar? There's several thousand-year difference, and what is the debate?
Right, you know,
that's often the debate that you hear. It's about who was here first, and the Islamic calendar is so much newer than the Hebrew calendar. You know,
right, and I also look at the same thing. You know, we get that same thing here in America. It's saying, okay, you know, we came over here and colonized. We fought with the Native Americans. We pushed them out, and yeah, there's probably some bad things that we did. But you know, how far back do you want to go? You know, people will say, hey, it needs to go back. You know, it needs to go to the Native Americans. Well, who was here before the Native Americans? I mean, how far back do you go if you're going to do that? And if you're going to go way far back, well, then I think Israel wins. They've been there way longer.
way longer.
So,
Shawn?
Well, when it comes to like Nevada and Las Vegas, I have not seen a major rise in attacks on the Jewish community. We have a really strong Jewish community here. And even like when it comes to the protests, I'm not seeing a large anti-Israel protest. I'm seeing a lot of pro-Israel coming from us. But at the same time, the Democratic National Party, or the Democratic Party of Nevada, actually, they've been taken over by socialists this past year. And they came out with a statement basically saying they support Hamas and they don't think that Israel should be considered a state. I'm also very familiar with a lot of the conspiracy theories. And it's interesting because there seems to be two types of conspiracies out there when it comes to Israel. One is that, you know, like the same thing that Hitler was saying, that the Jews are the cause of all the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is that they're not the cause of all the problems, that there's a subset of people who are pretending to be Jews who are all the problem. So those are the two main conspiracy theories out there. So it's funny that even in the conspiracy theory realm, there's that fight between should Israel be a state and should it not?
Yeah. And to speak to that, I think the concern is the confusion around terminology. So the people who are claiming that there are these group of Jews who are not really Jews, who are the cause of the problems of all the world. But a lot of people are arguing that they're, well, I've actually seen more. I've seen that they think they are Jews, but they're not real Jews, but that they're the Zionists. They're the real Zionists, and I think that's where the terminology is being hijacked, for lack of a better word, because that's not the definition of Zionism.
Mhm.
And I was a philosophy major, so I'm a proponent of, if you're going to have a discussion, we need to define the term before we move forward, because otherwise we don't know what we're arguing for or against. It becomes very confusing and conflated. And that's one of the things that I really see being conflated is this term Zionist and Zionist. And I've heard these theories that it's the people who look up to the elders of Zion, and there's all sorts of conspiracies around that. And like, that's not what Zionism means. And to mistake that, I think, is the root of a lot of this, a lot of the layman division. Certainly, that's not the division that's occurring in Israel and between Israel and Hamas. And I agree with you, Mitch. I think Israel has a right to defend themselves. Any sovereign nation has the right to defend themselves against any terrorist action, any anything that goes against the safety and the sanctity of their nation. They have the right to protect themselves. And we typically see this happen with Israel a lot. They attack, the media is silent, they're hush hush, don't say a word, and then they respond, they retaliate. Suddenly, how terrible Israel attacked. They didn't. They retaliated. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference if you're in a bar fight and you're the one who punches first, or you punch back. I'm not saying I'm advocating all of you guys go out and start fighting, but if somebody were to come after you, or somebody were to come after someone you loved, your child, your sister, would you not want to protect them? That's self-defense, that's retaliation. There's a huge difference between that and being the aggressor. And I think that, but the discussion that's being had by people who don't know much, are low information, and trying to figure out, what's going on. I think some of these conspiracies and these terms are being conflated. And my personal concern, and this is my own theory, and it's theory, but I think the Jews and the Christians have always, we are as Americans, and I think this is really what I'm seeing. I'm seeing it in America, and I'm seeing it in local communities, is this confusion. And we are a Judeo-Christian country. That's the moral underpinning, the backbone of this country, is the Judeo-Christian value. That doesn't mean there isn't freedom of religion, or people who believe or don't believe. Personal beliefs are different, but we are founded upon Judeo-Christian values, and the Jews and the Christians have always looked out for each other. It's kind of like a brother-sister union. And I think some of the hijacking of these terms has, and I do think it is intentional, is to take the Christians away from supporting the Jews, and to instill them with some fear that is causing a divide, where they can create this pitting of them one against the other. And I think that's really tragic, and it's really scary, because fuel does not need to be added to this fire. There's enough fire there. What are your thoughts, Ethan?
So several things. First of all, I have not, so in regards to the state of Utah, which is where I'm from, I have not seen any indications of significant anti-Semitic violence, anti-Semitic comments. But I also, again, I'm going to school full time, and that is my full-time job. I don't really go out of my way to socialize with people, because I'm like, just get school done. However, in regards to the actual Israeli conflict, there are several issues that the left likes to put out. For instance, Mark Ruffalo, the actor who plays most famously, and everyone probably knows him best as the Hulk in Disney's The Marvel Avengers, he came out and said that Israel is a genocidal state. They want to commit a genocide on the Palestinian people. Not true. And he's since walked that back. I'll give him credit where credit is due. He's since walked it back. But he's not the only celebrity person who's come out against Israel in support of Palestine. There have been many people, Gigi and Bella Hadid, famous models, have come out and said that Israel is an apartheid state.
Yeah.
Now, Courtenay, you said that as a philosophy major, you like to decide and determine what a word means, right? What does apartheid mean to you?
Apartheid is an intentional division that is created to segregate and have an otherization of the people.
It's an intentional exclusion, right?
Yeah, that's otherization. So they create them as like the others, and yes, exclusionary
Right.
practice.
It's an intentional exclusionary act. However, what a lot of people don't know is that there are close to 1.2 million Arabs living in Israel who claim Israeli citizenship. And they also have major parties, one of which, the party Ra'am, led by Mansour Abbas, no relation to Mahmoud Abbas, of the president of the Palestinian Authority, joined the potential government of Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, who might be unseating Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister. Then we also have the Joint List, which is another Arab party in the Knesset. They have Arab parties, and those Arab parties are represented in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, which seats 120 members. And they hold significant influence and power. Then also, in regards to how people are like, oh, well, the Palestinians can't vote. Well, first of all, the Palestinians who can't vote don't recognize Israel citizenship. They don't want to be part of Israel. And as is any case in any nation around the world, in order to vote, you have to be a citizen. And many of the Palestinians choose
Except this one.
Except for
Sorry, I couldn't resist, but yeah, go on.
Except for and many of the Palestinians, like I said, they don't want any Israeli citizenship. Then, building on top of Shawn's point about Hamas holding power in Israel, in 2006, Hamas gained a majority in the Palestinian Authority legislature. And Hamas, in their charter, and I'm reading you directly from their charter as I look at this, in regards to Israel, they say this: Israel exists and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. Hamas has no interest, no desire for peace. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the map. Another thing that a lot of people like to do is there's that famous tribe, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. Very catchy, right? A lot of people, I think, forget what that denotes. From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. If you look at the border of Israel, their border is defined by the Jordan River. And if you get rid of from the river to the sea, that means Israel's gone. There is no Israel. They are not interested in peace.
I agree. Just what I was saying before. They're not interested in any peace. They want to wipe them off the map. That's why, I mean, you know, nobody wants a full-scale war there, but, you know, frustrated beyond belief. It's almost like, how do you deal with that? And sometimes, you know, that may what it comes down to. Hopefully it's not before, you know, Iran is able to create a nuke, whether it be one that flies or one that travels in a suitcase, and we see a mushroom cloud in Jerusalem. You know, don't want that to happen. But I'll speak a little bit about Georgia. You know, we're deep South. We're very heavy religious faith. You know, Judaism, Christianity. You know, you have Sikh, you have Muslim, Islam. Not much you're going to see around here is, you know, people out there attacking somebody because they're Jewish or even because they're Muslim, like that. It's just that stuff that doesn't go on around here, as we say. But I do want to point out something as I was looking up about Hamas. And one of the things I know that, they will, position their rockets in neighborhoods. They may position them within a house that's how that, apartment building that's housing, Palestinians. They shoot their rockets off and they scurry back to bomb shelters they built for them. They haven't built any bomb shelters for their own citizens. And, it's left up to the Israelis to tell the Palestinians, hey, we're coming, an attack is coming, and give them time to leave. At least leave the block or something like that, because we're going to, shell this apartment building because that's where missiles came from. That's just horrible. I mean, you say you represent Palestine and the Palestinian people, but you don't do anything to protect your own people, from which you cause the rain of fire to come down on. That's just unbelievable. I mean, it's shocking.
From a propaganda point of view, it kind of makes sense though, because it allows them to not only attack from a position of cowardice, it also allows them to be attacked with and be able to use those pictures of destroyed apartment buildings, destroyed civilian areas as more fuel for the fire.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I was most shocked by the rabbi who did my father's funeral told my mom that the real problem is that the religious Jews, that's the problem. They just need to give up Gaza. And I mean, I was really shocked by it, because I don't know at what point people start to learn that appeasement doesn't work. You can't bargain with the devil. You can't make people who hate you and want to eviscerate you like you. There's no pleading with that. So
is there something?
Wow, Siri did not like that. That was very interesting. Anyway, but yeah, I don't know at what point people are going to learn that. That's why when I was talking about the retaliation, a nation should have the ability to protect their sovereignty and to protect their people. And appeasement isn't the answer. You can't do that with people who want to wipe you off. Mitch, you exactly illustrated that just by looking at the districting of the map. You said it as well, Ethan. That shows right there. What is it? So I don't really know what they want. What will they be happy with? Because it seems like it's never really enough. They just need to keep giving more and more. And we do realize Israel is literally the size of New Jersey. It's like this tiny, and there is one Jewish state, right? Do you know how many Palestinian states there are? There are 22. And they want to wipe out Israel.
Something else I want to point out is the retaliation point. So you all heard this whole big story about the Associated Press and that building that they shared with Al Jazeera, and it also happened to be housing the intelligence wing of Hamas. And the Israeli government told Al Jazeera and told that entire building, get out, we're bombing it. And they got out, and the Associated Press came out and said, oh my gosh, we barely got out with our lives. And then NBC was doing an interview with the Honorable Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they said that they were lucky to get out alive. And he said, no, they weren't lucky to get out alive. We gave them ample time. We've called off attacks. Israel has called off attacks because there were children in an area. So I'm not saying that Israel doesn't have faults and flaws. They do.
Of course.
For instance, the 1980s invasion of Lebanon, that was a big mistake, and Israel was the obvious aggressor in that. And we should absolutely condemn that. That was wrong and stupid. And at the same time, though, and there is tension, and my sister-in-law, she actually went to Israel for college for a little bit. And she said that there is a noticeable disparity between the Israeli Jews and the Israeli Arabs, and that there's an obvious tension between them.
Between
and I think that a lot
in Israel, who?
Israeli Palestinians, Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
Arabs who are Palestinians, Israeli citizens.
Right.
I guess because of the environment that they live in, there is a reason for that distrust. But at the same time, we're seeing more and more Israeli Arabs come out and speak out against the violence that is being supported by Hamas and Hezbollah. And the founder of Hezbollah, I actually saw this video with him, David Horowitz, and he was talking to a Muslim student at a college, and he asked this Muslim student who was a member of the Muslim Student Association at this college, and he said, I'm a Jew, and the founder of Hezbollah said that he wants all the Jews to gather in Israel so it'll be easier to hunt us. Are you for it or are you against it? And she said wholeheartedly and as cold as ice, for it. This is a hard topic to talk about because it hurts seeing the depravity that Hamas does and how, like Shawn and Mitchell said, and you said, how they hide behind civilians. They hide behind children. I saw this comic once where there's a man who has Hamas written on his chest, and he's like, "Come at me, Israel." He's got babies basically attached to his shoulders like body armor, and he's launching one missile, and you see all the Israelis are just like, Hamas is a depraved organization.
Yeah, they're terrorists.
And if the Palestinian people genuinely want to see change and want a two-state resolution, they need to have a complete change of government that says, look, we will fight with you against Hamas. We will get rid of Hezbollah. We want to start rebuilding our communities. We want to start building up our schools. We want to start building jobs and creating a business for ourselves. But we want a state of our own. And I guarantee you, Israel's done this many times in their history. They did that with Egypt and Sinai. Not a lot of people know about this, but there was a war called the 6-Day War. And well, actually, it was technically only 5 days, because on the 6th day, Israel, after kicking butt, rested in accordance with the Bible and the Torah. But they literally took the whole Sinai Peninsula. They took the Golan Heights. They took the entire West Bank, and they took all of Gaza. And they gave up the whole Sinai Peninsula when they normalized relationships with Egypt. Under Yitzhak Rabin, the prime minister of Israel, they started withdrawing settlements from Gaza and the West Bank and allow the Palestinians authority to govern themselves under the Palestinian Authority, of which Yasser Arafat, someone else who is controversial and I'm personally not a big fan of, as the chairman and president of the Palestinian Authority, until he was replaced by Mahmoud Abbas. Then there were more settlements that were withdrawn under the premiership of Ariel Sharon of Israel as well, and back in the early 2000s under Bush. Israel has shown time and time again that they are ready and willing to give up land for peace, so long as that peace is guaranteed.
Right.
And as long as the Palestinians have Hamas as their government, there will not be peace.
And this was my point, though, is that they keep doing this, right? So, that's why I didn't understand the rabbi's response, because it's like, well, how much more do they need to keep giving and showing that they're willing to come to the table when that doesn't seem to be what the Palestinians want at all?
And building on that point, the Israeli right-wing parties, the extremely orthodox parties, they're the minority in Israel.
The world continues to give money to the Palestinians and supporting Hamas and control that government. That peace will never happen. I think the only way they get in there and have a two-state solution would be, okay, here's the agreement. Hamas, you got to go. And if you go, we promise a two-state solution. And you got to go to free and fair elections on a cycle, not, somebody in there forever, like Hamas has been since it's first elected. Hamas has got to go. Now, I don't know if you're going to get the world to get behind that, because that's what's going to have to happen. You have to starve Hamas. The only other way to get them out of there is a full-out war, and God knows what that would end up turning into.
Nobody wants
that.
You got
to get rid of Hamas.
So it's actually interesting when you look at Hamas and their mindset. It's a lot similar to the American left, where they want concession after concession after concession, moving towards their goal while giving none.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And also, I have a question posed to you. Should America be involved past giving aid? Or should we actually put troops on the ground and help?
No, I do not. I think that what needs to happen is Israel has proven time and time again that they are more than capable of dealing with issues on their own.
Mhm.
And we need to trust the Israeli government, which Israeli politicians, I will say, are much more competent than many of the politicians that we have here in the US.
Mhm.
I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu, I mean, for instance, he has had like 5 elections to try and have him ousted from power, yet he's still in power. That takes some competency. That being said, I think that the United States, I think that there's an argument to withdraw foreign aid just in general, but I think that the United States should not put boots on the ground. Absolutely.
I can see the inclination and the desire to want to. I think that this is just like, many Americans argue that we have overreached in many wars and placed troops where they don't belong, as much as, they are allies. And I think a lot of Americans would like to. I think this isn't our fight. We do give aid, and that I can see that could continue, but I don't think that we should put troops. And fortunately, as Ethan said, they are a very strong military nation. So hopefully they will be able to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think they can take care of themselves. Boots on the ground. No, we don't need to be into another foreign war in the Middle East. Number one. Number two, I believe there needs to be some level of some military aid. I know that we provide them the rocket set, the Iron Dome. Yeah, if they don't have that, then they're going to be out of luck protecting their citizens from those random arbitrary rocket attacks. And if they don't have those and stop some of that stuff, I think it'll get out of control.
Mhm.
If Palestine is, Hamas is throwing rockets in there, they're shooting them down. Not a ton of life. I know life has been lost, but it's not like thousands. Like if 1,000 rockets weren't ever stopped, you're talking very high level of casualties, and I think that would end up in a war.
Mhm.
So I think it would be in our benefit to help Israel make sure that protection's there to reduce the conflict from getting any worse.
Mhm.
But as far as boots on the ground, no, I don't think so.
So I agree with you. I think that my stance on the foreign aid out issue is that scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Israel is technologically one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Hands down. It's just their way they perform in military and combat situations is incredible. That being said, I don't think that sending them hard cash is the best way to go forward. I don't think that just for Israel. I think that across the board in general, across all countries, I think that the United States should drastically decrease how much foreign aid we send countries all around the world, because right now our country is in a bad place. But speaking on the issue of money, what do you guys know about BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions?
I've heard of it, and it kind of sounds like most of the people for it are, the celebrities in Hollywood, but not exactly in depth about it. So,
Yeah, I'm not very well versed on it.
I'm not either, actually.
Okay.
School us, Ethan.
Yeah, tell us.
So boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Basically, what that is it's a movement to completely shut down and destroy Israel economically by boycotting Israeli products, withdrawing investments in the Israeli currency, the shekel, and to sanction and not allow anything flowing into Israel trade-wise. So it is essential, and it is supported, like Mitch said, by many of the celebrity class, many of the political elite class, and in particularly, the two most vocal proponents of this bill are Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and Ilhan Omar. And we both
essentially sounds like a Cold War for
right. Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Wow. Well, I'm not surprised by the advocates. We should expect nothing else from them. But
no, absolutely not. And There was actually a resolution that they tried to pass in the House. Thankfully, only 10 members voted for that resolution. So it went nowhere.
Good. Oh, the
That-
resolution went nowhere.
Yeah, the resolution to allow for boycott, divestments, and sanctions to be
Okay.
implemented by the United States government went nowhere.
Mhm.
However, there is another proponent that a lot of people overlook in regards to the rise of anti-Semitism and, quite frankly, just anti-Israeli sentiment in general. And it is the continual allowance by social media platforms. We believe that people should have a certain degree of respect, and we believe in free speech. And we believe that if there is to be censoring, it should be on an equal playing field. It shouldn't just be because the media hates Trump.
Yeah.
The Ayatollah.
I may not like what you say, but I will defend your right to say it.
Mhm.
Voltaire. Yeah.
Exactly. Only problem is that the Democratic Party and social media platforms continue to hobnob and get friendly with the people, the likes of Louis Farrakhan, who has literally compared Jews to termites. Yeah, he said, "I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm anti-termite."
Termite?
Termite.
And anti-termite.
But who's he referring to as termites? I mean, I'm kind of,
Jews.
I
He's
don't like
referring to
termites in
Jews.
my home, but what?
He's referring to the Jews as termites.
Wow. And that's not hate speech. That's perfectly acceptable.
No. I mean, granted, Twitter took down a lot of his most controversial tweets, and we have an article on the Truth Matters website
Right.
where we document a lot of those and we provide you
Yes.
with all the information. Then there's also the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the current supreme leader of Iran, who has called for the death of Israel, and former Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was a Holocaust denier and said that Israel ought to be wiped off the face of the map. You got people like Al Sharpton, who is the world's biggest charlatan and biggest race hustler, who the whole reason he got as big as he is because he incited a riot between the black community and the Jewish community in New York.
I remember that.
Yeah, the 1992, not Harlem riots.
No, I can't remember what year it was. I remember what struck it off was a comment from him. That's all it took. Yeah.
Yet the media and many of the politicians, primarily on the left, continue to hobnob and get close and cozy to these people, these figures.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? It's interesting because you think about a lot of the media and Hollywood are Jews, actually.
Mhm.
So, right, it's interesting that there's such a pervasive anti-Israel, anti-Semitic sentiment
Mhm.
Throughout these industries.
If you want to get conspiratorial, I have some explanations from them.
Right?
Yeah, all right.
Love to hear it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, let's hear.
So basically, the biggest conspiracy is that the Canaanites were eventually conquered by a Christian man and was basically forced to stop worshiping Baal and convert to either Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, and they chose Judaism. Basically, the entire thing is that the Canaanites took on the guise of Jews and disseminated themselves throughout politics, finance, and culture. And they've been pulling the strings as the cabal, as the Illuminati behind the scenes for a very long time. And they say that all these high-level people in Hollywood and stuff like that are descendants from them. So that's why they seem so anti-Semitic, is because they secretly hate the Jews because they're Canaanites and they worship Baal. So that's what the conspiracy theorists think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that too. I just wasn't real in depth on it. It is kind of funny that Mark Zuckerberg is Jewish, and why he would not take a stronger stance against things that are either I won't say anti-Israel. You're allowed to be anti-Israel, but to not take a stronger stance against people out there saying things like Ethan was saying? It's like, hey, we want them all back in Israel so they're easier to hunt. And he was like, why wouldn't he come out and make statements and say, hey, that's just not right. That's hate, and let's make sure we don't do that. But you don't hear anything from him. I've never heard him really make statements on anti-Semitism at all.
No.
That's odd.
He's also the most socially awkward person I've ever seen.
Oh God.
So
Yeah.
it might be an aspect of that. Is it even on his radar? How much control does he actually have of his company when it comes to hate speech policy?
Right.
Well,
But
it's run by a hate speech organization out of China. That's a known fact. I mean, they have bots that were, and it's created out of China, that run the hate speech triggers for Facebook.
I mean, Shawn, that conspiracy theory, a little bit of kind of makes sense because every Jewish person I know is a Democrat. That's very odd to me. It's not even like 50-50. It's like 70 to 80%. Now, I got some Jewish friends that are conservative, but they're very, very few and far between. It's very small.
I think the only Jewish people I know are conservative, but I tend to only hang out with conservatives. So
you discriminate based on political affiliation.
It's not my choice to break up most of these friendships. They will express their views and I express my views, and then they say they don't want to be my friend anymore because of my views.
You too.
I get a lot of that. Yeah.
It's happened to me more times than I care to admit.
Right.
Yeah. And I've never it's interesting. I wrote an article before we started Truth Matters, actually, for Daily Wire about Aaron Sorkin and the trial of the Chicago 7. And it was about the anti-Semitism in Hollywood and how that represented my views on that, that, a lot of Hollywood is anti-Semitic. And it's ironic because a lot of them are Jews. And I don't know. I mean, these theories are very interesting. I don't really know enough to speak to them. I started to go down the rabbit hole, but you know me, I have to go all the way down the rabbit hole before I can speak on anything. so I'm not quite versed enough there, although I'm working on it. But in the meantime, I have more of like a psychological kind of assessment that I think has some merit, at least for some of these secular Jews. So I know, and there's a really interesting film called, it's a documentary, it's called Arguing the World, and this speaks to this a bit. I do highly recommend it. So, Jews have been persecuted for, throughout history. They've been persecuted. They've certainly been the scapegoats in lots of circumstances throughout history. That's not to say they're the only ones. I mean, many different cultures and religions have been persecuted and scapegoated. But the Jews have definitely had their share. And I think, so a lot of them had the religious aspect beaten out of them. I think there's the controversy over whether or not it's a race, a religion. And part of that is because there are so few of them left. I mean, there's less than, don't quote me, but I think it's less than 1% of the world, something like that, or maybe less than 3%. It's a very small percent of the world. So I think in order to survive, I know this for like my great grandmother, she watched her mother be sliced in half by the pogroms, and she hid in her her Christian neighbor's ovens. She came over on a boat pretending to be her father's Christian friend's daughter, in order to be able to immigrate to this country. And that was pretty common, in the past. Certainly Jews pretending not to be Jews. Certainly we saw that in the Holocaust.
It was a survival instinct.
Exactly. And so I think that there is an element of where they've had this beaten out of them. So they're not religious Jews, but they carry the heritage because that's their lineage. And that's where the question of the race becomes. And I think there are lots of other theories around that as well. But, certainly in terms of a familial aspect, just like anybody would be curious about what their ancestry is, that is part of our ancestry, and from different, like my family is Ashkenazi. I think so, because they've had that beaten out of them, and there is this, with the survival guilt, there's the bread of shame that a lot of Jews talk about. And I know that when a lot of them came to this country, a lot of them were in the ghettos in New York. And the film Arguing the World talks about where the communists came and tried to, they went into the ghettos to try and recruit. And they went after who was in the ghettos. It was like the Irish and Italians and the Jews mostly, there were other ghettos as well. They certainly targeted those. And the Irish and the Italians said, we want nothing to do with it, because communism meant the rejection of their religion, and they weren't willing to do it. And the Jews were so desperate, I think, to assimilate and to be accepted somewhere. And they said, sure, take us, And
Ironically enough, they would ultimately be some of the earliest people to be purged.
Yes. But I think there is this sense of thinking that they're belonging, and this and it stems from this desire to assimilate, because historically that was survivalistic. But now they're really working against it. It's like, as all human beings, this is why I say it's more of a psychological argument. As all human beings, we look at some of our coping mechanisms from childhood, and they serve us at some point in time. Then as we grow up into adulthood, we may hold on to those coping mechanisms because they're familiar and they protected us at one point. But sometimes they work against us as we get older and as we go through different circumstances in life. They no longer serve us, and they may actually harm us. And I think that may be at least part of the, what is occurring with the Jews, that may be part of a component that we're seeing.
I actually have an interesting story. So it's about the missing 12, the missing members of the 12 tribes. And apparently, I watched a documentary. They found a group, I believe it was in Iran, that they claim to be from Jewish descent, but they're Muslim. And they were asked in the documentary, what happens if it's not, like a Sharia law, if something happens and it's not specifically, what do you call it, addressed by Sharia law. They say then we fall back on the Torah and on Judaism. So it's just really interesting that that's them kind of in hiding, assimilated into the Islamic culture, so that they may survive while still keeping some of those traditions alive.
Interesting.
I'll have to send you guys a link.
Yeah, interesting. I know nothing about that.
Yeah,
I'm always amazed at how little I know about so much.
There's also a group in China that is also that same way, where they claim to be from Jewish descent, practice Judaism, and they're currently being wiped out by the Chinese government. But they claim to be one of the. I don't know if it's them. I just know that they're one of the groups of people that are being put in those concentration camps, if they don't deny their religion, and that they are claiming to be one of the 12 tribes. I don't remember which one.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
The Chinese want to get rid of any kind of coalescing ideology ways. They want everybody's ideology to be the CCP.
Right.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they want Mao Zedong to be the only thought.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, that's why we had the Red Guard, the Great Leap Forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they were so devoted to the word of Mao that they couldn't see anything else having any value, any type of value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're not too far behind in this country either.
No, we're not, sadly. And the really sad thing that we're seeing here is that it appears and feels as though the normalization of hate is becoming more and more acceptable on a daily basis, every day of every week, of every month, of every year. And we see that through a variety of things, but primarily for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be talking about Israel and the Jewish people and the Muslim people. And there are many, many good Muslims out there. I know that there are.
It's good and bad in everyone, everywhere.
No, absolutely. But the problem is that there aren't enough speaking out against these radicals.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
For instance, using him again, Louis Farrakhan. He's the leader of the Nation of Islam. I have yet to hear him condemn these violent attacks.
Yeah.
And we've seen a stark increase in these hate-filled hate crimes in places like New York City. I saw a New York City's police report where they had an increase of hate crimes against Jews increased by nearly 70%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think it's all because they see in the media saying, hey, that's okay. Everybody supports the Palestinians, so it's all right.
And the hypocrisy of it, we're seeing all these hate speech is not tolerated. And, like we saw last summer, you can riot in the name of Black Lives Matter, even though it didn't really do anything for Black lives. But, but it's all this hypocrisy that it's okay to commit these heinous acts against Jews. That's not hateful. That seems to be perfectly acceptable. So
especially being encouraged by people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, or not encouraged, but empowered.
Right. Emboldened, for sure. For sure.
And how much of this is the fault of our media, specifically? Because growing up, I watched a lot of like Family Guy, South Park, and stuff like that. And it's full of making fun of Jews. Like that's Cartman's main thing in South Park is hating on Jews. And how much that, which is, we're supposed to be making fun of it, but people have internalized it instead.
So I think that South Park and Family Guy approached it from a very good way. Like, hey, there is anti-Semitism out there, but let's have a good laugh about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes laughing off the discrimination and the differences between people is the best way to approach a problem. However, the problem is that in the 70s, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we saw an increase, and Courtenay wrote about this a great deal in her CRT article on Truth Matters, where she talked about how the hippies and the far leftists infiltrated. Ironically, a lot of them were Jews. David Horowitz, for instance, he used to be one of these ultra far left leftists who was spearheading the leftist movement.
Yeah.
And many people like him, but who didn't reform like him, infected the media. They infected classrooms at every level. It's not just college that's the problem anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Jews were, this was the movie I was talking about. They became the New York intellectuals. And they had really replaced their religion, which they had abandoned, with this Marxist ideology, and that became their religion. And we see lots of the members of the Frankfurt School most of them were Jews. They weren't, religious or practicing Jews, but they were secular Jews who took on this ideology and subscribed to it as though it were their religious doctrine, and they executed throughout by infiltrating through the institutions, the education, the media, entertainment, and then the others, obviously the religion and the family.
Yeah.
Well, we are hardwired. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time, but we are hardwired to be religious. So if we are not, worshiping God, we are worshiping something else.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it an interesting way to look at things? For instance, the four horsemen of atheism, of new atheism. Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Christopher Hitchens,
Uh-huh.
they went out of their way to be like, oh, I am an anti-theist. I don't believe in the existence of a God or any God for that matter. Yet that anti-theism became their new religion. They became the high priest of that new faith and that new religion. And
a lot of people talk about atheism as being a form of religion, actually. And if you think about it, it's very, because it is so strong. It's a very dogmatic. It's not and a lot of them have other beliefs that they subscribe to as well. You know, some of them have replaced religion with science. You know, there's some other realm. And it's interesting. Jordan Peterson does talk about it. He's certainly not the only. He talks about it much more in the sense of us being mythological creatures. You know, and many psychologists and other philosophers have talked about it. It's really this need to subscribe to a universal morality or a universal higher ideal. You know, some sort of sense of that there is an ideal or a something greater than the here and the now. That human beings do have a need for that, and there are several other psychological components that religion fulfills. You know, certainly like the need for the community, the need for purpose, something to contribute to. You know, there are many psychological components that religion fulfills for humans, and that's why if they don't, there's that saying that you know, if you strip the culture of religion, then you're filled with a God-shaped hole. I don't know who originally said that, but yeah, I want to say Prager, but it's but I'm not, I don't quote me. I'm not 100% sure, but I love it. I think there's a lot of truth in it. You know, human beings are seeking or always trying to make sense out of the chaos and out of the unknown. And that's how our brains are wired. And it creates a lot of anxiety and despair when we don't have answers. And the reality is we don't have answers for so much. So, but if you take away the thing that gives us a sense of comfort to fill those unknowns, then we are left with a very big hole, and something's going to have to fill that. And in the case of a lot of these Jews, it is you know, Marxist ideology and communism, unfortunately.
The state.
Yeah. What a drastic change. We went from talking about a very serious and dark issue in regards to the conflict of anti-Semitism and Israel, both of which are just complicated issues, but also just disgusting in so many different ways and shapes and forms, and when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it. But to talking about faith and religion. And while we could talk more about that, and maybe one of these days we'll dedicate an episode of Calling America to the aspect of faith and religion, have a very philosophical episode. Our time has come to an end. So thank you, everyone, for watching Truth Matters. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button, and feel free to comment, and we'll see you guys next time.